Okay, welcome to the second of the videos where I'm going to be building a complex EWD application. Um, just to get the ball rolling, just to give you some background here, we're going to be using an instance of the MDB appliance. So if you go to our website www.mgateway.com, this is the home page you'll see here. If you click on the MDB tab and install MDB, you'll find all the instructions on where to get MDB. When you install MDB into a virtual machine, which is what I'm going to be using, or onto any machine, you'll find that EWD is also installed, and we're going to be using EWD. And you'll also have the GTM database all pre-installed there as well, and it'll all be set up for developing in Python. If we just go back to the home page again, you'll see over here EWD Python tutorials part 1 and 2. I'm going to assume that you've read those, in particular part 1, which will give you a lot of the background on how to get the environment set up and start using the MDB appliance. So assuming that you've done that, I'm going to be developing using Windows, and so I'm using two pieces of software, one called WinSCP and the other called PuTTY. Again, they're described in the tutorial. So let's go over here. This is my WinSCP window, and you'll see here I'm using the I'm in the USR EWD apps directory. I'm going to create a new directory. Right click and new directory. We're going to call it library. So there's our library directory, and if we double click on that, drill down into it, no files in there yet, of course, and we're going to create a new EWD file. I'm going to call it index.ewd. I could call it anything I like, but this is a good name for the first page in an application. And what happens is WinSCP will create you a new empty window. And rather than type the content in here, I'm going to whiz over and cut and paste some pre-built text into this. Now, I'm not going to build this application all in one go. I'm going to build it little bit by little bit to really give you an idea of how the concepts all fit together. But you'll see here we're going to start with just a single page. It's an EWD page because it's got that EWD config up the top. This is the first page, so its first page is true. And because it's a first page, I always like to say cache page equals false. That prevents the that means that EWD will compile in a number of headers into the HTTP response that will instruct most browsers not to cache this page, because it'll be effectively a static URL we're using, untokenized. You'll see that this is a very simple page. It's just a body with a table in it with 2 rows. First row has an ID. The first TD has an ID of menu bar with some text. Menu bar will go here. The second one has an ID of main container. Content will go here. And these IDs are going to be important, as you'll see. So let's just leave it at that to begin with. We're going to save that. And now I'm going to go over to a PuTTY window, which is already logged into my MDB appliance, and I'm going to cd to USR local GTM EWD, which is where my GTM environment is already set. That's where the MDB appliance creates the GTM work environment. I'll go into the GTM shell, even though I'm going to be developing in Python, because I find it easy to use for compilations. And we need to compile our new application. So I'm going to use compile all ZWD API. Application name is the same as the directory name, which was library. And that should now be compiled. Now I'm going to bring up a browser, and I'm going to hit this again, and this should. So there's my URL. If you look in the tutorial, it'll explain why I've used that URL, but there's my application name, library. The page name was index. And when I ran it, surprise, surprise, I got the 2 rows. Menu bar will go here, and content will go here. Well, that's not very interesting. That's nothing like what our application is. But we're going to use a couple of fragments. We could embed this stuff straight into the index page, but I'm going to use fragments instead because I think it kind of makes it more interesting to demonstrate how it all fits together. So I'm going to go over to my WinSCP page, and I'm going to create a new page, new file called initial menu.ewd. Let's just move that across so you can see it. I'm going to save that. Again, we have a new empty window, and what we're going to put in there is going to be this stuff here. So this is a very simple page. It's what's known as a fragment. So it just contains a bit of markup, this stuff in the div. And you'll see that I've said paged up in the top, page type equals Ajax. That tells EWD's compiler that this is a fragment, not a full page of HTML. And his first page is false because this will be pulled in within the application, so it'll be a tokenized URL. It will be generated automatically for this. So let's save that. Now we're going to create another fragment that we're going to call login panel.ewd. Again, initially an empty window, and we're going to just put in some similarly simple text into it. And that's it. There's just going to be a div with, this will be the login form dialog panel, and we'll save that. Now let's go back to our index page, and we're going to make this a little bit more dynamic, because instead of this text we're going to pull in those two fragments, and we'll do that first of all by adding an onload event handler equals, let's call this init, like that. And now let's add the script tag, and I'm going to grab that and copy it across rather than spend the time typing it. So what does this do? Here's our init function, and it's going to make these two calls to the special EWD function, EWD Ajax request. We're going to do a call for each of our fragments for initial menu and login panel, and we're going to put them into the ID's menu bar and main container respectively. So they should end up in here and down in here. So let's save that, and we'll go back to our putty window. Command line recall, just hit the up arrow, and now it's compiled in initial menu and login panel as well. And now with a bit of luck, when we run our browser and we rerun this guy, we'll just do a refresh, now we've got the content come in from the fragments instead, and that replaced the text that was in our original page. Okay, given the restrictions on the length of videos, that's all I'm going to do at this stage. In the next one I'm going to expand this out, and we'll start to see this turning into a bit more YUI-like stuff. Okay.